So joining us on the podcast today, we've got our good friend Ravi from Dell EMC. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, great to be here, Brian.
So we're recording actually on Tuesday. This is a great time for you guys though, because you've got a bunch of new technologies for the edge. I know you've got a couple new systems. You've got a little micro data center guy. Why don't you just do a quick introduction on your role within Dell EMC, and then let's get straight into these new products.
Sure, Brian. I look after all of product management for our server business. So, in short, anything related to the roadmaps, the feature functionality, positioning with our broad portfolio of products is something that I help lead and drive for Dell EMC.
All right, fantastic. We've got two new servers, well, one new server, an updated server, and then this micro data center. Where do you want to start?
Let's do this, maybe, Brian. So, first and foremost, since I think you've done a wonderful job teasing the audience, I'll start off with the fact that we absolutely have a new PowerEdge product that we are launching today. It's the PowerEdge XE2420. This is directly targeted at the evolving and growing edge market, because, as we know, uh, based on your favorite analyst, a research scientist. People talk about this as being one of the fastest growing markets and an area that most of the industries are taking a keen look at how this particular space transpires. So, towards that end, we are coming out with the PowerEdge XE2420. XE, by the way, E there is for emerging. So we wanted to make sure that
Okay.
we started looking at this particular space very keenly.
Real quick, before you get too far into this particular server, when we talk about edge, I think it means a lot of things to a lot of people, from carrier infrastructure for 5G down to what we used to call remote office, branch office. What does edge mean today to Dell EMC?
Edge essentially means that we are getting into a decentralized environment. Put it very, simply, we have seen with the advent of how compute industry has been morphing itself. You had the mainframes in the, let's say a few decades ago, which essentially were more of a centralized environment. We went into a client server environment, which became more centralized. Then we moved back, the pendulum swung into what we called as the cloud, and more importantly, the public cloud environment, which essentially meant things got more centralized. But as Edge evolves, we are getting back into a more of a decentralized environment where, as people and organizations want to pick up more data from some of the most, disparate systems and locations, to your point, if you look at telcos with the advent of 5G, you now will have more towers spread out across the globe. You probably want to pick up lots of information on what's happening at that location, so on and so forth. It could be in the transportation industry. Bottom line for us is it's a very evolving segment, and it has to do more with the fact that we are getting into a distributed environment of both data creation and data analysis.
So when we look at something like the XE2420, it's still PowerEdge family, so it's got all of that heritage, but it's functionally quite a bit different. You've got things like a dust filter, bezel optional, and you've got some other things going on there. In terms of hardware, what have you had to do here to tune this for that type of edge application?
Sure, Brian. So we did a couple of things. Remember, we said that more data is now getting created at the edge, and also people want to do more analysis. So essentially we did is we did a few things, because you now have to take care of the physical locations of those devices too. First and foremost, this is only 16 inches deep, so we had to make sure that we could bring something out that did not take too much of space. And we already talked about some of the other attributes. But more importantly, to help with the analytics, we also made sure that this particular server, the XC PowerEdge XC2420, could also support GPUs. so it can support up to 4 T4s, for example. The goal being that as data gets created and you need to do the analysis, you wanted to make sure that we provided obviously a dual socket server, that it also had enough of juice in the form of GPUs to do more of the analytics. So these are the kind of things that we designed into the product to ensure that we had a more fuller product for the edge market.
Are you seeing demand for FPGAs too for this audience, or is it primarily GPUs from what you guys experience?
We are seeing more of a demand for GPUs today. And the simple reason, as we talk to a lot of our customers today, the FPGAs are still not, I would say, in the forefront of this for one simple reason. FPGAs, as we know, are field programmable gate arrays, which essentially means that we need the user community or the customers to be able to go back in and program these elements or devices. And we don't still have that level of expertise built into most organizations. We do believe that FPGAs will take off in the next 18 to 24 months. We are not quite there the way we'd like to see it, but the GPUs serve a fantastic purpose because, especially if you look at the T4s, you will see that they don't take as much as power, and it doesn't need specific programming capabilities.
All right, I want to make sure we get to this data center thing, and I know you've got the PowerEdge XR2 update as well. That's a little bit uh, a smaller part of this announcement, but give us 30 seconds on the XR2 and what you're
Sure,
doing
Brian.
there.
XR2, the R there is for ruggedized. So we have XR2 now with the updated, obviously firmware and compute the CPUs. But this is again going back into locations where you need NEBS compliance, where you need to have a ruggedized version. Some of these go into some of our customers are putting them into ships. They're putting it into Humvees. I mean, there's a whole gamut of locations where you need ruggedized versions, and this is a classic and a great fit for those customers looking at the ruggedized compute solution.
All right. I really want to make sure we spend some time on this micro data center thing. This is really cool. For those that haven't seen this yet, it's a rack enclosure with all sorts of cool stuff built in, including cooling of all things. But let's talk about that because this thing's neat. I want to understand the capabilities here, your targets, and how far outside of the enterprise this might play. But this modular concept is really
You're
neat.
absolutely right, Brian. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, the whole concept. Let me give you the background of as to how we even actually came up with this. As we were working with one of the large organizations working on autonomous vehicles, it became very clear that, for example, as cars were being driven all through the day, maybe they park the car for the night, or they're probably out in a shopping mall. The idea was to ensure that all the critical data that's been collected by these autonomous vehicles, and I call them the data center on wheels, because the amount of data that's being created, analyzed, and stuff on an autonomous vehicle is huge. But importantly enough, there is lots of data that needs to be used and understood for others adjacent industries such as insurance, right? Because now you have to plan how do you go back and set the premiums for insurance, or for that matter, if an incident occurs, you want to probably know the history of what happened and stuff. So imagine coming up to, let's say you're at a mall, and as you park the car, you could potentially have all the data on the car now being uploaded into a micro data center, which is sitting right there in the vicinity. And the goal is now from the micro data center, you could have organizations who pull the data back into a central data center maybe every 24 hours or so. So now the organization can now go look at the entire data of how the cars are behaving. They could look at response times. They could look at what really transpired to go ahead and help create the right, as in this example, background information for the insurance companies to roll out new options as autonomous vehicles take off. That, for example, is a way how the MDCs can become more helpful and beneficial for our customers going forward. And the same example could play out in other industries as well, Brian.
Do you see this MDC concept eventually being developed as a converged infrastructure, or are the needs too bespoke at this point for something like that to
At this
happen?
current time, it is pretty unique, but going forward, we do think there's an opportunity to both for for converged infrastructures and hyper-converged infrastructures. We are closely monitoring and understanding this market segment, as you can imagine, Brian, but we're not quite there as yet. But we certainly foresee sometime in the near distant future an opportunity for both CI and HCI in this case.
Yeah, I mean, this is a different alternative to something like VMware Cloud on Dell EMC, which is can be delivered similarly in a little rack to go kind of thing. But this is um, it feels just a little more customizable and tunable for those that want to do their own thing and not necessarily be on rail or whatever other converged components are out there today.
Absolutely. I mean, this is where, I use the term, you know, build to buy. So there might be unique circumstances where the applications, the environments could be very unique. So instead of trying to second guess and try and use a cookie cutter approach, wherein we go ahead and provide a completely built solution, which might not meet their needs, the goal is why don't we provide our customers the options to choose what would probably be the best fit for them and go from there. So to your point, this is an approach where we want to provide the right building blocks for the customers to go back and uniquely address their situations. But if it comes to a point where we now have a semblance of repeatability, then obviously see an opportunity for CI and HCI.
All right. One last thing. As part of this announcement, you guys had IDRAC 9 got an update to V4. We've got a piece up on that already. We're big fans and users of IDRAC almost daily, and Kevin is in the lab anyway. Part of
Great.
this feels like you want to make sure that your customers that are looking at these edge servers understand that it's part of the PowerEdge line and not just a bolt-on that sacrifices capabilities. Just give us, we're at the end of our time, so give us 15 seconds or 20 on V4 and what that means for you at the edge.
Absolutely, the biggest thing is as more data is being created, we want to ensure that we are able to capture the data, analyze it, and more importantly, ensure that we have the right security elements put in place, because IDRAC does give you the ability to go ahead and manage and monitor the various elements of a compute infrastructure.
All right, perfect. That's a great stopping point. We've covered a lot of ground, and you've done well to quickly summarize these things for our audience. Certainly appreciate you participating in the podcast today, and thanks for checking in with
Thank
us,
you,
Ravi.
Brian. Much appreciated.